It's crazy.
Yeah, it's certainly, and you can't play there.
Right. Yeah. That's the big issue is I am visiting family and I'm bored out of my mind.
How long are you there for?
Coming back on Sunday. I came out with my dad. He's staying the week. I was like, I'm not
Oh,
staying
you
out there
came out with your
anymore.
dad. That's cool, though. All right.
Yeah.
So, are you going to do some hiking?
No.
You you should, man. I'm telling you. When I was out there, and I was in no shape to hike, and I'm not talking physically. Uh, I did it anyway, and it was phenomenal. They got some awesome stuff around there. You know, you can make good on your time. I think you could enjoy yourself.
Yeah, no, I mean my cousin that lives out here hikes and enjoys it, my uncle, but yeah, I have no intentions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm talking about the mountains though, not just
No, I
hills.
know, yeah, we're the my uncle has a house up in Flagstaff in the mountains, so we're going up there tomorrow. Uh I'm hoping I don't get talked into hiking though.
There's too much poisonous shit around there. Is my thing.
Like,
Scorpions,
oh yeah, yeah.
rattlesnakes. You know what I mean? I'd be a little bit nervous to go to sleep at night. I was out there. I think I got bit by a brown recluse, and my ass swelled up real bad. Never went back. All right, let's get started. We got 15 games and about an hour and 10 minutes here. Baltimore, Boston. Oh, and hey, we're glad to have you with us. Uh, you want to just kick it off? No, no, no. I think we just go straight into the games here.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, we already did enough with the pleasantries. Erod, Eduardo Rodriguez, Luis Ortiz. I think DraftKings had Straley earlier, but he had been moved to the bullpen anyway. I'm surprised they even allow him to pitch out of the bullpen. But Luis Ortiz, it's not like this is a massive upgrade based on his minor league numbers. It doesn't necessarily mean he's terrible, but it means he has not been good this season. Let's start with Erod, though. He's going to be the chalk mid-range guy today against a bad Baltimore team with a high strikeout rate. And I did mention to you before we started streaming, I thought there would be more quality pitching. And I'm not talking about up top. Obviously, there's some good pitchers, but on a 15 game slate, there's not a lot of cheap options that you like. There's no Homer Bailey. And a lot of the guys at the bottom either don't have good matchups or can't strike out a single batter across 9 frames. So we're going to get to all of that, but prefacing it with that's why Erod is going to be, at least I would assume, very popular today.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfectly fine spot for him too. You know, there's
Yeah.
strikeouts in the Orioles lineup. Rodriguez is a pretty good pitcher. He's facing a lot of righties here, um, all righties except for Chris Davis, but he holds his own against righties. He has a high strikeout percentage against right-handed hitters. I don't think there's a whole lot of reason to be concerned here. He has a almost 26% strikeout percentage, 289 expected WOBA to righties, and there are strikeouts and not a lot of good hitters in this Baltimore lineup. I think that the price tag is perfectly fine. I think it's similar to Jack Flaherty yesterday, where even I think in a lot of the games where he kind of disappoints, like Flaherty did yesterday, he still is going to give you a score where it's fine and it doesn't kill you. You know, Flaherty finished with like 15 yesterday. I think that a large percentage of the not great starts from Rodriguez are going to fall into that range just because of the strikeout upside that he has.
Yeah. I mean, Baltimore is a heavy K team. I'd rather Erod be a righty, but I don't really care because he's always struck right-handers out at a high clip anyway. There's nothing I don't like about this start outside of the fact that he's going to be popular. Luis Ortiz, though, what do you make of this guy going up against a power laden Boston team at Camden Yards?
So this morning I saw Jimmy Yacobonis listed, and I liked the spot for Boston because Yacobonis is inconsistent and tends to walk a lot of guys. I like it even more now because Yacobonis has some decent stuff, and we've seen over the last year or two, however long he's been up and down with the Orioles, that when he's able to throw strikes, he's actually pretty difficult to hit. Luis Ortiz, I don't think even really has that going for him. He was part of the Jonathan Scope trade last season, but he's currently the number 31 ranked prospect in the Orioles system. The Orioles don't have a system of many prospects, so that's not really a good place to be. At AAA this year in 11 starts, he has struck out 16.8% of hitters while walking 9.4%. It's not really where you want to be facing the Red Sox. He's allowed 2.4 home runs per nine, despite the fact the Orioles AAA team plays in an extreme pitcher's park and the league in general is favorable for pitchers. He doesn't appear good. If he were any good at all, he would have been up already this season because the Orioles don't have pitching. They're dying to find someone who can go out there and not get embarrassed other than 3 of their 5 starters, and he's
or
still
along with 3 of their 5 starters.
yeah. Well, I mean, like Bundy, Cashner, and
I know.
yeah. But I mean, and it's still June 14th, and this guy is just now getting his first shot. He's not good. I like Boston a lot.
No, I was surprised they called him up at all. Like that's the state of disarray that Baltimore's in right now.
Yeah, I mean, there was an interview with their GM a week or two ago, and he was very straightforward, and they were kind of just talking about the minor league guys and when would some of them be coming up. And he pretty much was like, well, we have a couple of good minor league guys, but they're not ready yet. And then other than that, none of these guys deserve to play in the major leagues.
God, I tell you what, when I saw their implied run total here and I saw it at 5.6, all I could think of is, God, that's low.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's, I think, when Yacobonis was expected to start.
That might be true. Yeah, that could definitely be the case. Because you're right. He's not like terrible. He's not awful.
Right. He's capable of being really bad,
right,
but he has some decent stuff.
6.3 run total now. Highest on the slate. Colorado's has come down a little bit. So you've got Boston at the top. Who are your favorite bats here? I don't think we need to go in depth because they're all nice, but is there anyone you like specifically?
So Mookie's not in the lineup, which means you get Michael Chavis leading off. So that's pretty appealing. JD would be my favorite just because I think he's the best hitter here. Rafael Devers obviously has really put things together lately, and so I think he's a good play. But overall, it's just whatever you get to here, I think is fine because they're top to bottom in a spot to score a lot of runs.
Washington, Arizona, Max Scherzer, Robbie Ray. Scherzer, dude, I said it a lot, but this guy had really endured some bad luck earlier this season. You look at him over his last 9 starts, he's got 34% strikeouts, 16% swinging strikes, but more so, 0.45 home runs per 9, and a sub-2 ERA. He still has a 351 BABIP on the season with those numbers. Like, you could argue that he's still due for more positive regression, just given how many guys have gotten on base that shouldn't have. I guess the big thing here, though, more than anything, is Max Scherzer worth rostering over Cole when you have pretty comparable ownership and salaries?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really weird slate for Scherzer. To preface it, I think Scherzer's a very good play on his own.
And he always is.
Obviously, the Diamondbacks aren't the worst matchup in the world, but I think that you're splitting hairs here in a couple of different ways. For one, I don't think he's as good a play as Cole is. Cole has a matchup against Toronto. Cole is the better strikeout pitcher, which is what we really care about here. And Cole also has been, elite at preventing runs. But also with Arizona, you do have 4 lefties in the top 5 here. And while Scherzer is good against anyone, I don't think it should be overlooked that he's struck out 38.5% of righties compared to 26.8% of lefties.
Yep.
You're talking about paying up for someone, you would ideally, they'd be in a matchup that in all ways is advantageous for them. And facing 4 lefties at the top of the order isn't perfect for Scherzer. So, in that regard, I think he's behind Cole anyway. But then also you get, if you're just looking to play like an ownership game, you get Lucas Giolito at no ownership.
I know.
At a little bit less expensive than Scherzer. He's been absolutely amazing this year. Scherzer, I think, is still better. We have obviously a track record with Scherzer, and his strikeout percentage this year is still higher than Giolito's. But if you wanted to go the ownership route, you have Giolito right there. So it's kind of just an interesting spot for Scherzer because as much as I like him, it's like you have a guy who projects better at the same price point, and then you also have a similar upside guy at much lower ownership that's available.
No, it's a great point. Listen, in today's deep dive, which you can find on awesomemode.com, Adam and I switch off each days, and we put a lot of hours into that for pitching purposes specifically. I labored over how to write Lucas Giolito today. There was a lot that went into that, and I'll read a little bit of it briefly once we get there because I think it plays into what you were saying as well. But we'll get there shortly. You have 5 lefties in the line. Or no, you know what? We have 4 or 5 because no Avila, right?
4 plus Ray, but it's 4 in the top 5.
Yeah, I was looking. For some reason I was on Thursday. I had Avila in there. The thing is, you have. Is it because it won't even load for me? Is it still 4 lefties in the top 5 though?
Yeah, it's Dyson, Marte, Peralta, Jones, Escobar in the top 5.
Yeah. Okay. So it's basically the same lineup as yesterday without Avila, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not a terrible spot, but it's not great. And it certainly isn't Garrett Cole's spot either.
Right. So I guess the best way I would sum it up, like how I feel about Scherzer here, is if you're playing 150 lineups, obviously have exposure to Scherzer. He's got a good chance to be the top scoring pitcher on the slate. But if you're someone who's playing, like 5 to 10 lineups, and it's more important for you in every single lineup to, be making those pieces count, kind of what are you getting? What's your reason for having Scherzer? Because if you're looking just for projected points and don't care about the ownership, I think it's Garrett Cole. And if you're looking for a spot where you can take advantage of being contrarian, I think it's Lucas Giolito. So you're getting someone who I don't think projects as the best play, and he doesn't project for low ownership.
Right. Yeah, and Giolito's striking righties out at 32%, so it's not exactly like he's bad. He's very good. He just won't have any ownership whatsoever. I have a couple concerns. Like I said, I'll voice them when we get there and bounce them off you, see where you stand. What about? I mean, I'm not paying for Robbie Ray on this slate. I just don't see how I can do it, especially when I have a guy in Heaney who can give up runs and get strikeouts. Yeah. I mean, seriously, Robbie Ray, I expect to give up some runs today, and I expect him to get a lot of strikeouts like he always does. I don't think he's worth this salary against a good Washington team.
No, me neither. And, you mentioned Heaney, but even at the same price point as Robbie Ray, you have Blake Snell in a very difficult strikeout matchup, but still a better pitcher than Robbie Ray. And it's not like Ray has a good strikeout matchup here either. Turner's a tough strikeout, Rendon, Kendrick, Suzuki. These guys are all difficult to strike out. You get some with like Michael Taylor and Victor Robles, but it's not the easiest strikeout matchup, and it's a team full of good hitters. So if I were looking to just get like a low-owned pitcher at that price range, I would just take Blake Snell.
No doubt about it. My girl's on a bachelorette trip this weekend. I'm just going to shit up this house so good. And then maybe on Sunday I'll clean it before she gets home. I was thinking about it because I looked over and I have food, bowls, everything laying out.
Yeah.
I don't like cleaning, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I will. But if she were to come home and see it, like she left at 9 a.m. and it's already yeah. If she were to come home and see it, I'd have to listen, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. I live by myself, so
I know you do. That's why I brought it up. I wouldn't have mentioned it to anyone else because they'd be like, "Yeah, I hear you, man." With you, right. Yeah, you don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah. If I'm going out on the weekend and there's a chance that someone might be coming back with me, I'm like, okay, I'll go hide some stuff in the closet.
Right. How clean do you think you'll keep this new apartment of yours?
Actually, we'll probably do a pretty decent job, at least for the first couple of months.
When I lived by myself, I kept everything spotless.
Yeah.
But then I don't, and it's like, it can wait, Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I think it'll be like, that it's a nice place, and so for now it'll be like, oh man, I really like how it's like 5
months from now,
right? And then once there's something I don't feel like doing, it's just gonna be like,
right, exactly. Yeah, I like to say I'm not dirty, I'm messy.
Right. I'm the same exact way.
Right. All right. Like, who needs a hamper? Anyway, right. Do you want to talk about any Washington hitters though?
Not really in the context of the full slate. I mean, everyone knows Rendon has power and Turner's fast and Suzuki has power for a catcher, but none of them stand out to me on the slate.
Blake Snell and Andrew Heaney going for Angels or the Rays and Angels respectively. I'll let you talk about Snell. I want to mention Heaney for a second though. I really believe that Heaney is a good fantasy pitcher. He has some issues, and I'll give you again. I'll throw these, bounce them off of you. So he's striking out 38%. No. Sorry, 42% of the batters he's faced. He's got a called plus swinging strike rate of 37%, 20% swinging strike rate. The thing is, his curveball, which looks like a slurve, like if you watch it, it's not a looping curve. It sweeps off to the side and gets batters looking really dumb. 37% whiffs on 30% usage, but his sinker's also missing bats. They make up 95% of his pitch mix. Now, here's the thing. He is giving up some home runs. He's given up 2 in all 3 starts. 2 of them came with runners on base. And I looked at this. With no runners on, he's been phenomenal. Out of the stretch, it seems like Heaney has struggled more, but that's not something we can really predict or project for. So a lot of strikeouts, a ton of missed bats. Rays have the highest active roster K rate versus lefties this year. it's risky, but I also think there's a ton of upside in a guy like Heaney who's going to be way less owned than a similarly priced Erod. What are you doing with a guy like Heaney?
I like Heaney in tournaments too. It's a Tampa team that has plenty of power and can take advantage of mistakes. But, Heaney's been really good. And even going back to last year, he didn't have this level of success. And I don't expect that from this point forward, he'll continue to have the level of success he had over his first 3 starts. But he still has, above average strikeout stuff. This is a good pitcher's park. It's a Tampa team that we know has a lot of strikeouts in the lineup. And I'd be willing to take my chances on him here. He saves you some money and still gives you upside if you can't quite get up to that top tier pitcher.
I'm a little bit more hesitant to roster Snell than you are. He's very
No,
good.
I'm hesitant also.
Okay, well, talk to me about him.
Yeah, I don't think that I would get to much Snell here because the Angels don't strike out a lot. It's just that if you, for some reason, needed a pitcher in that price range, I would rather get Snell than Robbie Ray because I think he's
agree.
And I think they're both in less than perfect spots.
So that was just like a 1v1 comparison you were doing, not
I was just trying to stay in that price range. I would rather save money and go to Heaney. I'd rather save money and go to Rodriguez, or I'd rather find money and go to Cole or Scherzer. Right.
No, I absolutely agree with you. It's a really tough spot. He's really good, but it's really tough. Now, if Snell was Heaney's price, that'd be an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, I think if there were less pitching at the top of the slate, it would be a different conversation. I mean, his last start against Boston at this price point, I had like 65% Snell on DraftKings.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's underpriced for his talent level. It's just that it's not a good strikeout matchup, and there are, there's Garrett Cole against Toronto. There's a Max Scherzer. There's Giolito. There's guys that are less expensive facing Tampa Bay and facing the Orioles that have strikeout stuff. So there's a lot of other options in either direction of his salary that I can get to.
So you're not stepping on the Snellevator tonight is what you're saying.
I don't think so.
Okay. I do think guys or on the Rays side of this, I'm not opposed to rostering a discounted Tommy Pham or even a Garcia at the top of the lineup. Like, Heaney is not impervious to damage. He's clearly not infallible. He's allowed multiple home runs in 3 straight starts, all 3 of them. He's also racked up like 28 strikeouts. So it's a give and take situation. And if Tampa were to hit 3 home runs, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah. I'll throw Mike Zunino in there as well. He's 2,800 on DraftKings, where Austin Hedges is 3K in cores, and Hedges is just going to get, I would assume, monster ownership at that price point. Zunino obviously isn't the cash guy there, but he's got tons of power, and at much lower ownership than Hedges, I think he's a pretty interesting pivot.
All right. Any other bats from this game?
No.
All right.
I mean, you mentioned Garcia and Pham. So.
Yeah, at the top. And I think one of the reasons for that, though, is I'd rather be site specific. Like, if they're cheap, I'll go there. If not, it's a 15-game slate. But DraftKings, for example, Tommy Pham's 4,200. I just think that's too much of a discount.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Tyler Mahle. Sorry, what's that?
No, I was going to say, and the same thing I mentioned, the catcher on DraftKings applies on Yahoo, where Zunino is $7 and Hedges is $10.
Right, absolutely. Let's talk about Tyler Mahle. He is projected to have a decent amount of ownership, and this is solely because there aren't a lot of discounted pitchers in good spots. The issue I have, though, is I don't find this to be a particularly inviting spot for Tyler Mahle, who is not bad. He's not bad. He's phenomenal against lefties or against righties. But you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 5 lefties in the lineup today. The righties in this lineup are the ones I'm not worried about. Fedorowicz, Jesse Chavez, who I don't. Is Smiley expected to come in since he's moved? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I haven't seen. I assume it's either Smiley, Palumbo, or Miller, but I'm not really sure which one.
Okay, yeah, I think Smiley will pitch in long relief, but I don't know. It kind of matters, but either way,
FanGraphs has Miller listed for what it's worth.
Yeah, I saw that, and Miller was listed on DraftKings too earlier. I don't know. We'll look it up. But you have Chu, you have Mazzara, you have Asdrubal, you have Odor, you have Guzman. You don't have Joey Gallo, but you do have Great American Ballpark. Like, am I missing something? Oh, by the way, and the Rangers' implied run total came down from like 4.8 from 4.7 to 4. So I must be missing something here when it relates to Tyler Mahle, who's very good against righties, but for his entire career, including 2019, has really not been good against left-handed hitters.
I think it's too cheap for that level. I think that I do think that he's improved somewhat against lefties. I think he's doing a better job of getting the ball in on them.
Yeah.
I think his numbers are a bit skewed by 1 or 2 starts, but it's still not the perfect matchup. I mean, you prefer him when he's not at home, and you prefer him when he's facing righties, and neither one's really the case here. So I get a little nervous because of his ownership. I think that a guy that overall has like a 25% strikeout percentage and a 3.5 PCRA is underpriced at 6,700, but it's a scary matchup. And so I would expect that, if you're playing I would expect to be getting to Tyler Mahle as an SP2, but I also would be looking to some of this Rangers power as leverage against him in tournaments because we know that he gives up power to lefties. We know that this is a great park for home runs.
Yeah. I have interest in Ranger bats if Mahle's going to be as popular as he is. And it's just weird to me that the Rangers total has fallen so much, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I just chalk it up to Mahle being a pretty good pitcher.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. The problem is, who are you going to pivot to? Zach Davies, who's got a 14% strikeout rate?
I think that price range is actually kind of loaded. I mean, loaded at least in terms of guys that can do well. Like you have Mahle, you have Matz, you have Fried, and you have Pluko.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess. I mean,
at least one guy from that group probably has a good game.
Oh, I'll give you that. Yeah,
but
that's not saying much.
Right. No, I mean, they all have legitimate question marks, but I think that, and this is a spot where, when you talk about the advantage that the reason that really, if you're looking to make money, you should be playing as many lineups as you can in whatever tournament you're in. Like Mahle and Matz and all that whole group, they should project pretty similarly. They all have either questions about themselves, questions about who they're facing, or both. But being able to but I think that using that range as your SP2 in a lot of lineups gives you a lot of upside, and chances are at least a couple of those guys have good games.
Oh yeah, well, no question there, because once you get further down, you're talking Stephen Brault, Pomerantz, Hoffman, Keller, Gonzalez, Quantrill, Carpenter, Sanchez, and Ortiz. Like you'd be hard pressed to make an argument that any of them can have a good game tonight. And I know that sounds extreme, but
yeah, I mean, like I can make an argument for a couple of them, but they're not more convincing arguments than we just made for Tyler Mahle.
Right, and I don't think it would be an impassioned argument either.
No.
What are your thoughts on hitters here? And I guess it kind of matters what we get out of the Texas bullpen.
I don't think it matters that much because they all suck. But
yeah, lefty righty to me with this Reds team is kind of important to me. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's Miller, then like Dietrich is better and the lefties are better. Suarez, I think, is the top play from Cincinnati regardless. Jesse Chavez struggles with right-handed power. Suarez has plenty of right-handed power. Suarez destroys lefties, so if you saw Smiley or Palumbo, he'd be fine. Shelby Miller wouldn't be an issue for him either. Yasiel Puig, I think, is a good play as well because he has plenty of power. He's actually been worse against lefties than righties, but I don't put a whole lot of stock into that. So those two guys are the ones that I like the most from Cincinnati. And then from the Texas side, you really just want to be looking at left-handed power, which, would be Chu, Mazara, Cabrera, Odor, and Guzman. All 5 lefties in there have power.
Puig has hit lefties really well this year, though.
Okay.
Oh, actually, not real. It is 92 WRC plus and 315 WOBA, so that's not great. But he has a 235 ISO, so he has hit him for power. It's basically when he hits him, he hits for power, and that's really all I care about anyway.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. Last I looked, he was the chalkiest player on FanDuel.
What's his price?
He's really
I know the Reds are really popular over there in general.
Yeah, he's
2,800.
28, right? So it makes sense. Look, I really like the Reds today. I want to be sure who's coming out first because while you're right, Shelby Miller and Drew Smiley are both terrible, or whoever it is, I do think having Smiley come out there and getting a bunch of righties makes a little bit more sense. But what I would say is I'd rather it be Miller than either of them because righty I'm not worried about. Lefty you obviously like. Just if you have to do several lefty matchups for some of these guys, it could be ugly. Some of them are terrible against same-handed hitting, but I guess we'll find out. What are your thoughts on the Rangers, though, with 5 lefties in this lineup?
Not my favorite stack overall, but if Molly's going to get a lot of ownership, then I'm interested in left-handed power.
All right. Detroit and Cleveland, we moved to Comerica, if it's still called that. Adam Plutko and Ryan Carpenter. Ryan Carpenter, lowest swinging strike rate on this entire slate. Adam Plutko has not been good, but the Tigers are one of the heaviest strikeout teams, particularly against righties. Well, lefties too. And you had mentioned them just a moment ago. Let's talk about Plutko first because, like you said, you can go to that range, but all of these guys have red flags.
Yeah, so first I just wanted to kind of double back, and Joe Palumbo was optioned back to the minors, so it should be Miller or Smiley.
Yeah.
Probably Miller, I think. So as far as this game goes, I think that the thing for Plutko here is that I think he'll get less ownership than Molly and Matz and probably Fried. He's not as good as any of those pitchers, but he does have the best matchup out of the group facing a Tigers team that is predominantly right-handed and that has the second highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching with the second lowest walk percentage. Plutko since last season has struck out about 23% of right-handed hitters. He gives up a lot of power, but the Tigers don't have a lot of power. So, if you wanted hitters from the Tigers, you can look to guys like Stewart and Castellanos at really appealing price tags. But overall, this lineup doesn't have a lot of power. They do have a lot of strikeouts. You have a pitcher in Plutko who I think can take advantage of the platoon advantage here. So I think he's a good tournament play. In cash, I'd rather go with one of the more talented pitchers.
All right. And by the way, the reason I had mentioned Smiley was because today was his scheduled start day.
Yeah, there's a report he has something wrong with his ankle though. So I don't know.
But there's conflicting reports on that. Were they going to give him a rest, or was it really not a big deal and they just don't want him anywhere near the mound?
Right.
So I don't know. If anyone knows, feel free to let us know. If you saw something that we didn't, would certainly be helpful. What do you think about Cleveland against Carpenter?
I mean, I don't think Carpenter's any good. But I don't think the Indians are that good either. I mean, Lindor's good. Luplo has some power. Ramirez used to be good. Maybe he'll be good at some point in the future. The fact that they're getting a lot of ownership is what kind of scares me here because while I don't think Carpenter's good and I think the Tigers bullpen does give you a lot of upside throughout the game for tack on runs, it's just a Cleveland team that doesn't have a ton of power, and rostering teams that don't have a lot of power because, at really popular ownership levels is not really my favorite thing to do on 15-game slates.
Yeah, not really, especially with Cleveland. What a disappointing team they've been. It doesn't mean they can't run up the score tonight against Detroit, but there's so many alternatives here that I don't think you need to. But I guess the biggest thing would be that a bunch of these guys are very inexpensive. Lindor is going to cost you, but outside of that, everyone else, if you're outside of, I guess, Carlos Santana, is pretty affordable. So with not a lot of cheap pitching, at least not good cheap pitching, Cleveland's definitely going to be popular. There's no question about it. Do you have any interest in the Tiger bats? Because when I looked, we're waiting on an update on the ownership. Earlier, there were a decent amount of relatively high-owned Tiger bats too, which has a lot to do with Plutko not being great and the Tigers being cheap.
Yeah, I think that Castellanos and Stewart are both really good plays because Plutko does give up power to both sides of the plate. Castellanos is the best hitter on the Tigers. Stewart has power. So those two guys stand out. But as far as full stacks go, if you look at the stack tool on the awesemo.com site, the Tigers on DraftKings have a 1.7% chance of being the top scoring stack. They have 7.1% aggregate ownership. That's not really what you're looking for in tournaments.
All right. Oh, hey, by the way, I'm doing a giveaway at awesemo.com because we love giving away free subscriptions. You can win 1 month of Awesemo Plus subscription if you guess the player who scores the most Yahoo Fantasy MLB points on tonight's slate. It's a $70 value. All you have to do is make a guess. Reply to with your guess to the pinned tweet at awesemo_com on Twitter. All you have to do is reply with your guess, retweet it, and follow awesemo_com and at awesemo_MLB. Very simple. So the giveaway rules are also simple. Pay attention. You have to get your guess in before 7:05 Eastern time lock, right? Dude can't double dong by 7:30 and you pick him. You got to retweet the tweet and follow both Awesome accounts. If there's a tie, we'll pick 3 random people from the finalists, and that'll do it. Check it out. Awesemo_com on Twitter, the pinned tweet. Get in there, make your guess, get that Awesemo Plus subscription, a free month. All right. I was wondering why the ownership projections were only showing me 4 players, and then I realized I wasn't logged in. So, like it automatically will log you out sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm smart. Anyway, let's keep it moving. We still got a bunch to get to. Miami and Pittsburgh, Steven Brault, Trevor Richards. I honestly think Richards is a perfectly fine pitcher with one really, really good pitch, but 9K is good. I don't see any way I get there, especially against a low K team in Pittsburgh. It is a good park. I get that. If you're with me on that, we can talk about Miami bats potentially against Brault or whatever you have in this game. It's all you.
I don't have a whole lot of anything. I don't want to pay that price tag for Richards. I don't want to roster Brault against a bunch of righties when he has about a 13.5% strikeout percentage, and Miami doesn't strike out a ton against left-handed pitching. If you wanted to get to like an Austin Dean or a Starlin Castro at really cheap price tags, I think that's fine. But they're not the highest upside hitters, and it's not like it's a good park. So I kind of just don't have interest in this game.
Yeah, neither do I. I could understand wanting to go to Miami here if you aren't paying down at pitching and you wanted to pay up at both pitcher spots, because a lot of these Miami bats are inexpensive. They're not. The thing is though, they're not dirt cheap. Like Alfaro on DraftKings is 39, Cooper's 46, Anderson's 4K. They're not insanely cheap, Adam. Like we've seen them before.
Right. It's not like they're priced to where you could like get a 5-man Miami stack and get like Cole plus
Scherzer
or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And then still have like one-offs you like. You're still paying reasonable price tags for everyone that isn't Starlin Castro, Yadiel Rivera, or like Austin Dean.
It actually feels like you're overpaying for a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. Garrett Cooper compared to, I don't know, he's more expensive than a lot of outfielders.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't have any faith in Steven Brault. Don't get me wrong, but Miami isn't great either. Is there anything from the Pittsburgh side that you have interest in? Again, it's a bad park. Richards isn't a bad pitcher, so I don't really have much Pittsburgh interest.
No, me neither. It's not a good park. For the most part, they're expensive. If you're just looking, in tournaments, we talked a lot about how I think ignoring a lot of things other than power is a perfectly fine approach. $3,500 Corey Dickerson probably gives you more upside than a lot of hitters in that range, but it still wouldn't be a core play for me or anything.
All right. St. Louis, New York Mets, Daniel Ponce de Leon and Steven Matz. Sell me on the Matz hype. Is it just that he's cheap? Because
he's just better than his price tag. It's not like it's a good matchup.
Yep. Because it's not a good matchup at all. It's just he's too cheap. I agree with you. Go ahead.
He can give up a couple of home runs here, and as long as guys aren't on base, he'll be fine. He has a 25% strikeout percentage to righties. He's been good at limiting production against them. He's allowed a 305 expected WOBA this year. His whole thing for years has basically been he'll give up home runs to righties and he can't hold runners, but he will get strikeouts. And at this price tag, the strikeouts are pretty valuable. So I think that, it's a high risk play, but he's got more upside than most of the cheap options on this slate. That said, just like we talked about with Tyler Mahle being too cheap for his talent level, I do expect Matz to get ownership. And I do think the Cardinals are a cheap stack that gives you a ton of upside when you have on DraftKings, you have a $3,900 Paul Goldschmidt. DeYoung's affordable. Ozuna is the most expensive hitter on the team. He's been good, but you get like a cheap catcher in Molina. I think Harrison Bader's a really sneaky tournament play because he does have power and speed, so he can get to Matz in a couple of different ways. It's a Cardinals team where in lineups I don't have Matz, mini stacking them or grabbing one-offs, I think is a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, so do I. I don't think it's crazy at all to consider St. Louis here. I like Matz, and he's fine, but he's still allowing, 2 home runs per 9 to righties this year? He still gives up power to righties.
Right. He has a 25% strikeout percentage, a good expected WOBA, and he's allowed a 201 ISO.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, I'm sorry, 1.84 home runs per 9, which still isn't stellar by any stretch. A lot of hard contact too, a lot. So yeah, I get the Matt's love. He is going to be popular, but you also have a slate with several teams with run totals above 5.6 and a lot of really expensive hitters as well. Do you have interest in Ponce de Leon or the Mets offense?
Not really. Ponce de Leon on some slates that would have interest in because he does have strikeout upside. Struck out 35% at AAA this year. Also walked 14 or 15%. But it's really just that, in his price range, I'm more interested in Andrew Heaney or Eduardo Rodriguez in their matchups. And then if I'm looking to take a pretty substantial risk on a pitcher, I would rather save the money and get to, Mats or Molly or Freed or whoever. So it's tough for me to get to Ponce de Leon. As far as the Mets go, though, Michael Conforto at 4,400 is appealing on DraftKings. Not a core play, but certainly someone who stands out. And then Dominic Smith on FanDuel at 2,300, I think is a pretty clear, value play, assuming he's hitting in the middle of this order. On Yahoo, they're all priced, I think, a bit better. Conforto's at 18, Smith's at 12. I don't think either of those really jump off the page.
By the way, I want to go back to something quickly. One of our subs, been with us for a while, the Maharashi. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I know him. I just don't know how to pronounce his username. It's something I had considered, but now that he mentions it, we should probably talk about it quickly, or I'll just mention it and we can move on. He said, take it for what it's worth, but the Reds rolled out their lineup that they run against left-handed pitching as if they're anticipating Smiley. It does make sense. There's only 2 lefties in this entire lineup today.
Yeah, but outside of Winker, who's missing? Yeah, I mean, who's missing though?
Winker and isn't there one more lefty? Yeah,
I mean,
Barnhart. He's a switch hitter, but
yeah. I mean, Votto and Dietrich are in. Yeah, no, I think it looks like a pretty normal lineup.
Okay, I swore there was one more. Maybe I'm wrong, but either way, we'll still try and figure that out.
Yeah, maybe it feels like there was, but I think it's just Winker.
He might be right. Maybe I'm just thinking Barnhart with the switch hitting. I don't know. I guess we'll see. I'd really like to figure that out though. Anyway, do you want to talk about anything else from this Mets Cardinals game?
No.
What about Atlanta and Philly? Max Fried and Nick Pivetta, who has actually been really good since being recalled. Even if you look at the first start, it was against the Cardinals, Adam, after he'd been recalled from AAA. He allowed 3 runs in the first inning and then threw 4 scoreless. So he's thrown 19 innings of 1-run ball over his last 2+ starts.
Yeah, he's been good since being recalled. We know he has really, really good stuff. It's a site-dependent play for me. On DraftKings, what I said about Ponce de Leon applies to Pivetta as well. I think that he's talented enough for his price tag, but I think that there are 2 guys around him at better price point or in better matchups. And then if I wanted to take a risk, I would just go to a cheaper guy. On Yahoo, though, $32. That's the same price as Adam Plutko.
Crazy.
It's less expensive than Tyler Mahle. It's less expensive than Richards. It's less expensive than every pitcher that we've. It's less expensive than Mats. It's less expensive than Ponce de Leon. It's less expensive than Fried. He's one of the cheapest pitchers on the slate, and he's more talented than everyone in that price range, at least as far as strikeout upside goes. So it's a brutal matchup against Atlanta. I hate taking guys in this spot, but on Yahoo specifically, I like the idea of getting to Pivetta, probably at pretty low ownership as an SP2.
All right. Yeah, I'm not going to pay the same price for him as like Heaney or more for him than Erod, but where he's significantly discounted, it's not a crazy idea to do so. He has looked a lot better since returning. And the one thing we do know is that, and you just mentioned it, it's not like he's just getting lucky. He looked horrible at the beginning of the year, and it wasn't even as much bad luck as it was I don't know if it was cerebral, like if it was in his head, but you would watch some of those starts. And I remember Gabe Kepler's like, he just doesn't have any, what was it? I can't remember what he said, but he wasn't happy with him, and that showed.
Didn't he basically call him a wuss?
Yes, but I can't. Yes, exactly. But I can't remember what the words. I know you know what I'm referring to. But
yeah, I don't remember what he said. I just remember that being the general sentiment.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. but he is good. So if he's really cheap, it makes sense. What about Max Fried?
Yeah, so I like Fried on DraftKings. I don't like him as much on Yahoo, where he's $39. It's not a good matchup against Philadelphia. It's a tough team to strike out. It's not the scariest lineup for Philadelphia, but still have respect for the guys at the top of the order. Fried's a pretty good pitcher. He has good stuff. His strikeouts are down this year, but his walks are also down. PCRA is in the mid threes, which is a perfectly fine place to be. So he's just kind of similar. He's very similar to Molly and Matz, where I think he's a good enough pitcher. He's more talented than his DraftKings price point, and I'm fine getting there. Last I checked ownership projections, he was lower owned than Matz and Molly. He was higher owned than Pluko. So I don't really have a strong preference between him, Matz, and Molly.
Right now, we have Max Fried at 11% on DraftKings, which is where we're looking to target him. And yeah, I think Fried at 11. Did I say Matz? I meant Fried. But at 11%. And you have Molly at 17. Steven Matz now with the highest projected ownership on the slate on DraftKings among all pitchers, 28%, Adam.
Yeah, and so I think it's not that I have a ton of confidence in Fried. It's just that I don't really have less confidence in Fried than I do in Matz.
Right.
So my expectation would be that, again, I get to that grouping of pitchers in a lot of my lineups. And then within that grouping, a lot's determined by ownership, where maybe I get Fried at Matt's projected ownership and Matt's at Fried's projected ownership or something like that.
By the way, Kapler said Pivetta didn't have the intent or conviction to put hitters away.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Nice words. Kind words. All right. What about batters? Anything interesting? By the way, Atlanta does have 5.2 total last I looked. Let's see if it's come up or down. It's down to 4.8, which is a lot more reasonable than 5.2 where it was earlier in the day.
Yeah, it's not a spot that I really want to get to. I think that Josh Donaldson's price tag is appealing at 3,800 on DraftKings. We know Pivetta will give up home runs, but Acuna is pretty expensive. Freeman's pretty expensive. Austin Riley's priced up. Not a spot that I would expect to get to a lot. Looking at the stack tool on Awesemo, Atlanta with the probably under-owned, but still not a really high probability team. A 3.5% chance of being the highest scoring stack. Aggregate projected ownership at 2.3%.
All right. So not a ton of interest there.
No.
White Sox and Yankees, Giolito, Sabathia. First, I want to let you know that you can get half off your subscription first month at awesemo.com by using the promo code Deeper Dive. If you don't win the giveaway today by guessing the highest Yahoo scoring producer for major league purposes, easy for me to say, shit. You can get a free. Yeah, I'm going to give up. You can get 50% off your first month at awesemo.com. Use the promo code Deeper Dive. Get the top stack tool Adam was talking about, the ownership projections, player projections, all of our articles, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder, you name it. Yahoo specific stuff, everything over at awesemo.com. And all of the tools that Awesemo uses himself as far as the stacks, the ownership, the projections is exactly what is on the site to help you build a solid foundation. So use the promo code Deeper Dive if you want to check it out. You get half off your first month at awesemo.com. All right, Yankees and White Sox. So let me just tell you what I was referring to earlier today or earlier in the show when we talked about Giolito. It's a unique spot. He just broke onto the scene as one of the elite guys. He doesn't have nearly the same track record as Cole or Scherzer, but he's arguably been the best fantasy pitcher over the last 2 months. He got 30 fantasy points or more in 7 of his last 8 starts, striking out 32% of batters over that span, 15% swinging strikes, and only 5% walks. But I also believe he's been lucky in it. And when you pitch to that tune, it's hard to not be lucky. Here's what I mean. 0.88 ERA and a 3.5 xFIP. 3.5 xFIP is still very good, but a 0.88 ERA stands out. 212 BABIP, 0.68 WHIP, and a 90% strand rate, Adam. A 90% strand rate. These are all numbers that you just can't sustain no matter how good you are. So there are some issues when I see this and say, okay, He's still really good. He's going to continue to be really good. But is Lucas Giolito going to continue to be an 11K pitcher, especially against the Yankees? Now, I know what you're going to say. If Lucas Giolito was even 15% owned, we wouldn't even be discussing this. But when I looked and I saw that he was coming in at virtually zero ownership, it's up a little bit to 2%. That's what puts me in a bind, because jack him up 10%, I have no interest.
Exactly. And that's me. Josh and I went kind of back and forth on that same thing, because it's not even like I'm strongly endorsing Giolito here. I think he's a really good pitcher. I don't think he's as good as Scherzer, and I don't think he's as good as Cole. But I think that, if Scherzer is going to be 25 or 30%, and Giolito is going to be 2.
Yeah, Scherzer 26, Cole 24.
Right.
Giolito 2.
And so basically what Giolito offers you is, if you're already contrarian with your hitters, he's more or less unnecessary, because, as long as you can find the money for Scherzer or Cole. But if you just wanted to stack, the Padres and whoever the 3 most popular one-offs are or whatever, Giolito over Scherzer is a stand that you can make, because he's going to outscore Scherzer a higher percentage of the time than his ownership, suggests that he should. I prefer Scherzer. I prefer Cole, but he is at least an option. It's like Matt Boyd yesterday, where I said I didn't expect to get a lot of Matt Boyd exposure, and I didn't. But at the same time, I expected him to be really low owned compared to the other guys at the top, like compared to DeGrom. And if that was a stand that you wanted to take, it probably, if you took it 150 times over the course of a season, it probably would make you some money.
Right. Yeah. Like, again, I don't know if he's worth $11,000 on a regular slate. I think he's really good. I don't think he's as good as he's been, because that's really, really hard to do. But at the same, here's the big thing that stands out to me, which is where I tend to agree, or why I tend to agree with you. There's only 3 lefties in the lineup, and his numbers against righties have been stellar, which is just one more reason. And you might say, yeah, but the Yankees don't strike out. I get that, but when you're pitching like Lucas Giolito has been, it kind of doesn't matter. In a vacuum, there's no way you or I would ever be choosing Giolito over Cole or Scherzer. Right. But when you have such a massive disparity in ownership, it's at least a conversation we need to have.
Right. Like, I think the most likely outcome for me, if I were actually playing tonight, like if I were back home, would be that, if Giolito comes in at like 2%, that I get like
10,
5 to 10.
Yeah. Right.
And it would most likely be in lineups where I tend to have more popular hitters.
Right. Yeah, I get it. What would you do as far as second pitcher? Would you do anything different? Because you're already basically mixing guys up down at that bottom tier.
Yeah, I mean, if you play Giolito, you can play whoever you want.
Right.
As far as ownership goes.
Yeah, no question. All right. And by the way, there is a much larger potential swing if you're talking about a bad game from Scherzer or Cole and a great game from Giolito than a bad game from Plutko and a decent game from Tyler Mahle. The range of outcomes in terms of ceiling is significant once you get up top.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good, like, if Scherzer has one of those games where he scores like 13 points, Giolito can beat him by 20.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely, unless like one of those mid-range guys goes negative, that they lose to another one by 20.
But the probability is built into the ownership.
Right.
Like, we already know it's unlikely because he's not going to have any ownership for a reason. But he's good. So, yeah. All right. Good discussion. What are your thoughts on batters here? Or CC Sabathia against the White Sox?
No real interest in Sabathia here. I do have some interest in the right-handed power from the White Sox, in particular Eloy Jimenez, who started out really poorly this season, but is one of the top hitting prospects in baseball, has monstrous power. Seems like maybe he's starting to figure things out a bit, and he's still affordable. He's not free like he was for the last week or two, but he's still affordable. So I think he's a pretty decent play. Welington Castillo is another catcher option that is affordable and gives you power at lower ownership than Austin Hedges.
All right, word up. What are your thoughts on the hitters here?
Other than the ones I just said?
I thought you were talking about Sabathia. My fault. I was researching an office chair. Okay. All right. All right. Oh man, it should have been tipped off from the Hedges part. Minnesota, Kansas City. Kyle Gibson, Brad Keller. Did you see the total for Minnesota? It was 6-1. It's 5-8 now. But are you buying into that against Brad Keller here?
No, it was I said this morning I thought it was a weird spot
Yeah,
where,
he's not terrible. He's just not a
right.
good fantasy pitcher.
He doesn't get strikeouts,
He doesn't
but
give up home runs either.
right, he's good at limiting production. And while that isn't useful for fantasy, when you get pitchers like that, I tend to not think of them as gas cans, because the entire reason they're in the major leagues is that they consistently are able to keep from getting blown up, even though the ball's being hit. Minnesota, they weren't projected for like any ownership today, which still made them really appealing. But it was just kind of a spot where I looked at that total and was like, yeah, I think I would take the under, just because Keller doesn't really give up a ton of power. Lots of good hitters, with power in the Minnesota lineup. No, Nelson Cruz isn't great. He actually was my favorite hitter in the lineup this morning, but still a decent lineup. Just I don't really buy into the implied run total.
Do you think that some of these sites have preemptively overpriced Kyle Gibson after a couple good starts?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's good, but I don't
think he's that good.
Right. There's a lot of pitchers where they're priced to where like you're paying for their median projection, or you're paying for
his upside. He should be the price of Eduardo Rodriguez.
Exactly.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. And he's been very expensive. He's been up there for the last couple of starts, which is like if Gibson was where he should be, I'd probably have some interest in him against the Royals.
Right. If he was in that, if he was around 8K, then yeah. But why are you paying for Kyle Gibson over Eduardo Rodriguez or over that 7K range? They're all guys that can give you 25 points. Why are you paying for Gibson?
Right. I would take Heaney over him too.
Yeah, him too.
Do you like hitters on either side? I mean, like we said, I know you talked about Minnesota and no Cruz here, but Keller, I just don't love stacking against him. I'm not buying into that total. Maybe I'll be wrong. Do you have Kansas City interest against Gibson?
I don't really have Kansas City interest. I do still have Minnesota interest, like I said, just because of the ownership.
Sure.
I mean, right now we have their aggregate ownership at like 1.5% on DraftKings, with a 7.5% chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate. On FanDuel, it's 2.1% ownership, 8.4% chance of being the highest scoring team on the slate, and then similar numbers on Yahoo at 7.5% and 1%. So I still think that if they're going to come in that low owned, they're a good stack. It's just that I guess I think it's less likely than normal for a team with a normal 6 implied run total.
I agree. And again, not to get too into the weeds, Keller hasn't allowed. And look, you can have a stack that puts up good numbers without home runs. I understand that, of course, but he hasn't allowed multiple home runs in a game all season long. He's allowed 4 home runs in 86 innings. Like, if you remember last year, I think he went 45 innings before he allowed a home run.
Right.
So he does do a good job of keeping the ball in the yard. And the Minnesota hitters it's funny because they're all almost the same price on DraftKings, at least. They're all so similar. Kepler, it doesn't matter. You already mentioned them. Let's talk. We don't have too much time anyway. Toronto and Houston. Garrett Cole, Anibal Sanchez. Look, no surprises here. 2.9 run total for Toronto. It's the lowest on the slate. Cole's a 298 favorite, minus 298 at home. Good park. I mean, there's a whole lot working in his favor, and just simply the fact that he struck out double-digit batters in more than half of his starts this year. He's fantastic, but he's also expensive, and I think we've already talked about him a lot. If you want to add anything with Cole, that's perfectly fine.
I mean, just to kind of quickly reiterate how good he is, leads the slate in strikeout percentage. Out of all starters that have thrown at least 750 pitches this year, he has the 4th highest called strike plus swinging strike percentage, behind only Snell, Sale, and Scherzer, which I guess does make him the 3rd highest on the slate, but still.
Well, not when you factor matchup, though.
Right, yeah. 2 strike percentage, he's 3rd behind Paddock and DeGrom. Basically, any stat you look at, PCRA, he leads every qualified starter at 2.01, so 1.7 runs better than his actual ERA. He doesn't give up a lot of a lot of barrels. He doesn't walk a lot of guys. He strikes out almost 40% for the season. He's, to me, the clear number 1 pitcher on this slate.
He is the clear number one pitcher. And I'm actually, were you, I guess it's not surprising, but when I first saw it, I was a little bit surprised that Scherzer basically has the same ownership, actually more in some sites than Garrett Cole. But it's just because he's Max Scherzer and people always rush him. But like I thought Cole was definitively better play on paper than Scherzer tonight.
Yeah, I think so too. And so again, I kind of mentioned it earlier when we talked about Scherzer that even though in a vacuum I like Scherzer and I obviously think he has he's one of the top pitchers. It's just kind of hard. It's kind of I expect that if their ownership projections stay how they are, I would expect it to be a slate where I basically just end up like double the field on Cole and then underweight on Scherzer.
Okay. It makes sense to me. Aaron Sanchez, Mr. Blister, has got a $4,600 price point today on DraftKings. That's nice, right? Yeah. You like that?
I mean, I could see getting there.
I know you could. That's why I asked.
I wouldn't feel good about it.
No, it's been rough for him. I know I had actually tweeted about this. So no, you know what? I may have mentioned it to you that, yeah, I did because you're like, don't make me want to play this guy again. When I had mentioned that he had 2 starts there where his whiff rate on the curveball was above 30% and he was really getting a lot of good missed bats on the off-speed stuff. But then he comes out against the White Sox, gets hurt against Tampa Bay, has a decent game against Boston, and then gets lit up. And then he was in Coors, so I don't really care about that. And then against Arizona, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what to make of Aaron Sanchez right now, and I'm just usually worried that he's not going to make it through 4 innings because of an injury, not because he gets shelled.
Right. I haven't known what to make of him for like 3 years now. The guy throws 94, 95 miles an hour. The guy has a really good curveball. He has a changeup with a bunch of movement, and somehow he's not good at getting outs. I don't know. I don't know how he's not better than he is.
I know.
On one, like at 4,600, like he's got so much more talent than Ryan Carpenter does, or Luis Ortiz does, or any of these pitchers under 5K. So from that standpoint, if you're looking to get like Cole plus Coors or something, Sanchez is kind of just a necessary evil, I guess. But it's still, I'd like to stay out of this price range entirely because the Astros don't strike out a lot. Aaron Sanchez, for whatever reason, isn't good at getting strikeouts. And more often than not, I think he doesn't really help you here.
I agree. Do you like hitters against him? Like is someone like Yordan Alvarez at the cleanup spot in play for you again? And by the way, Sanchez, you're talking about a guy last year that had like a negative K- BB rate against lefties.
Right. This year he's actually struck out 21.5%.
I know.
He hasn't given up much power. But he does have a 183 expected ISO compared to a 139 actual ISO against lefties.
He never gave up much power either, though.
What'd you say?
He never gave up a ton of power.
No.
He just loaded the bases and couldn't get easy outs.
Yeah, he walks guys, and exactly. He doesn't put guys away. And yeah. So Alvarez, when you factor in price, would be my favorite play from the Astros. But I don't think that I would be getting to a ton of Houston overall.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4 games to go here. Making good time. We finally make our way out to Colorado, Coors Field. Cal Quantrill, Jeff Hoffman. Sick matchup at Coors. 2 teams with run totals right now, implied totals above. Oh, no, they came down a bit. Okay, 6-2 for Colorado, 5-9 for the Padres. A 12 over-under in this game. Obviously, we expect a lot of runs to be scored at them. I don't want to. We're not going to talk about pitching. Let's talk about hitting on both sides and get a little bit in depth here. Let's start with Colorado.
I don't think there's a hitter in this game I don't like. I said it this morning, and I stand by it. Colorado's running 7 lefties out there. No Nolan Arenado in the lineup tonight, but you get 7 lefties with Blackman, Dahl, Murphy, Tapia, McMahon, and Walters. So, sorry, six lefties. Quantrill's been blown up by left-handed hitters so far this year. He has only struck out 18.3%. He's allowed a 388 expected WOBA, 248 expected ISO. Pitching in Coors obviously isn't going to do him favors there. And it's some quality lefties. Blackman has power, Dahl has power, Murphy's starting to come back around a bit. Tapia is starting to maybe figure things out. McMahon has some pop. Walters is a better hitter this year than he has been in the past after making some adjustments. So I think it's a really, really dangerous matchup for Quantrill. And I think that you see Colorado maybe come in a little bit lower owned than they should because there are 30 offenses on the slate and because they are expensive and there's pitching to pay up for. The stack tool on the site has Colorado with a 10.2% chance of being the top scoring stack and 8.8% ownership. So I think there is a little bit of, profit margin there on them as a full stack. You know, Blackman, Dahl being the guys that I like the most, Tapia from a value standpoint. On the other side, Hoffman's been pretty decent this year, but he is someone that profiles as a pitcher who should struggle a bit in cores because of his curveball and because of his reliance on that pitch. And we still don't have, a long track record of any sort of success in the major leagues for him. Former top prospect who really just hasn't panned out. So far against righties this year, he has struck out just shy of 24%, but he's allowed a 368 ISO, 387 expected WOBA. You have a lot of power in the San Diego lineup getting a park boost. No Franmil Reyes is annoying, but you do have Hunter Renfroe in there. He's overpriced, so pay up to be contrarian. Manny Machado is a clear value, batting third. Josh Naylor's a reasonable play. Tatis is contrarian, just like Renfroe is. I love both of these teams. And Austin Hedges is clearly the cash game catcher on the slate.
I think Colorado's stack ownership could be lower too. No one wants to pay $5,400 for Daniel Murphy, even at cores.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the top four there, you're basically taking yourself out of legitimate SP1 consideration if you're going Blackman, Story, Dahl, Murphy, and another Rocky.
No, you definitely are. Unless you're playing like Aaron Sanchez as your SP2.
Right. And even then, I'm not sure if that works.
So if I have him in right now, if you played Cole and Sanchez with 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So Story or Blackman, Story, Dahl, they're all above 5K. Then Tapia and McMahon, no Murphy there, because you have 2,800 per player remaining for your final 3 roster spots.
Right. So it's not really doable.
No. Nope. Not at all. Unless you're bottoming out catcher, and still it's going to be hard.
Right. And so what I think probably happens is that Colorado as a team is a little bit underowned. But then if you actually break down those Colorado stacks, there's probably a really high percentage that is like Rogers, McMahon, Walters, Tapia, plus a stud or something.
Yeah, that I would agree with for sure.
Right. As opposed to, the expensive guys and sacrificing a pitcher. So it presents an opportunity to, you have an advantage just by stacking Colorado because they're probably underowned. But if you go a step further and are willing to take some chances at pitcher and get the more expensive, better hitters on the Rockies, you probably have an even more contrarian version of that stack.
So we have Dahl, Story, and Blackman all around 10 to 12%. I'm just going to use DraftKings for now. Tapia at 10%, McMahon at 5%, and Murphy at 5%. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty nice ownership for a team facing Cal Quantrill and Coors.
Brendan Rodgers, 15% for obvious reasons. All right.
Yep.
He's not very good, though.
He should be eventually, but not right now.
Right now, it's been a struggle. Anyway, I think we pretty much covered all of that. I do want to just kind of add to your point about some of these San Diego hitters. You can really expect the same thing with them with like the Renfroes and the Tatis Juniors. While I think really popular stacks will be Josh Naylor, Machado, Kinsler, Hosmer, and Hedges.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we move on. Oakland, Seattle. I said it on the early bird today. I almost bought into the Chris Bassett hype, and then I pumped the brakes. Good thing I did. I don't buy it. All the underlying numbers are screaming he's still not good. And Marco Gonzalez, my God, I'll tell you what. I didn't buy into the hype with Gonzalez. I hyped Gonzalez for a while. Not this year, but last year, the year before. I really thought that, he just figures one thing out. Get one pitch that you can miss some bats on. You have good control. His ability to get called strikes was second to none. It's been a disaster for him this year, Adam.
Yeah, it hasn't been pretty, and it's not a good matchup here against an Oakland team with a lot of right-handed power.
Cheap right-handed power,
nonetheless. You saw he's out for at least a week after having melanoma removed from his ear. But
Wait, what's
Still,
that?
Stephen Piscotty is out for at least a week after having melanoma removed from his ear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, at least he
So yeah,
got it
he's out for a
removed.
week. Yeah, he's out for a week while waiting more tests. Um,
So he's out
but
for a week after having cancer.
yes,
Huh. Tough
yeah.
guy.
And the waiting tests to make sure that that's
It's
all that. Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, of course, you would hope that's all it was. Go ahead.
yeah. So, but still, right-handed power in this lineup with Chapman, Davis, Pinder, Semien, Kana. It's not a good park for hitting, and I do have some interest in Gonzalez just because he's so cheap. I think that he projects as the best of those terrible options, because of the park, because he's just kind of a completely mediocre pitcher. Hopefully, his fly balls land on the warning track and some pop-ups get caught in foul territory and he gives you like 6 innings with 2 strikeouts, because that's kind of what you're hoping for. But yeah, it's not like I'm actually endorsing Gonzalez as a good play outside of the fact that he lets you get to those Rockies bats that we talked about.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices. So I'll tell you what, though, the price of some of these. Oh, do you have the stack tool up?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the ownership on Oakland on DraftKings is?
3.5.
That's it.
Yeah, they have a 4.9% chance of being the top stack and 3.5% ownership.
I mean, Chris Davis is 41. Pinder batting fifth is 37. Chapman's 4,200. It's a really cheap stack. Outside of the lefty-lefty matchup for Matt Olson and maybe Marcus Semien.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. A lot of upside there, whether you're full stacking or just grabbing, one-offs or mini stacks. They are affordable for how much power they have.
They certainly are. Anything else from this game? Any other hitters you want to talk about?
No, not really. Kyle Seager's cheap, but I think there are a lot of good third base options.
All right, 2 to go. Dodgers and Chicago Cubs. By the way, if you haven't played on Yahoo yet, and you're taking part in the giveaway today, which is to guess the highest scoring player for MLB on Yahoo. If you haven't signed up yet and you want to get involved, you want to check it out, use the code AWESEMO when you do, AWESEMO. You'll get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points when you deposit. So it's a win-win. You can use it as currency, as cash on the site to win and play and deposit more money. And you have no MME, no 150 entries, none of that stuff. Lower management fees than all of the other sites. So if you use AWESEMO when you sign up, get up to $30 Yahoo Sports Rewards points over there at Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. 2 games, Dodgers, Cubs, Giants, Brewers. We'll do the Dodgers first here. Rich Hill, Kyle Hendricks. Kyle Hendricks has been pretty stellar this year, but you ain't getting me to pay $10K for him.
Yeah, especially against the Dodgers.
Nope,
no thanks.
Never happening.
Nope.
Cue the complete game shutout, 10 strikeouts.
Right. I thought Lester was going to get there last night. I had a chance to win a tournament with him, and then he did what I expected him to do and gave up home runs to everyone. But
he finished
with
what, like 7 or something? Yeah.
What'd you say?
I think he finished with like 7 fantasy points somehow.
Yeah, he had like 14 and a half after 4 innings and finished with 7.
Yeah, that's not the direction you want to go.
No, it wasn't. But yeah, not getting the Hendricks here. Not a whole lot of interest in Hill either. I mean, if you told me that you preferred him over Blake Snell and Robbie Ray, I wouldn't really argue with you. But I don't prefer him over. I don't want to get to that price range at all. So not a whole lot of interest there. Really, all that I'm interested in from this game is I think you can take advantage of some underpriced power. Chris Bryant's $4,200. But on the other side, you have a pitcher in Hendricks who is good, but Bellinger's at probably the cheapest price tag we've seen for him in like a month. Verdugo's cheap. Everyone on the Dodgers is pretty cheap for how talented they are. So it's a spot where you can get really low owned guys that have, double dong upside.
Is that it for this game? Just not a lot you like here?
Nothing.
All right. Well, you got Zach Davies going up against Drew Pomerantz. This is a great one. Honestly, with Davies, you have on one hand a guy who's done a good job of limiting runs. You have a low implied total for a bad San Francisco team, 3.7. Davies is a 136 favorite on the road. But he also has a 13% strikeout rate against lefties, 17 against righties. His swinging strike rate is 7.6%. It is the same on the season as Dan Straley. Okay, that's not good. And
Right.
also a 2.41 ERA and a 4.83 xFIP. Right, a 5.09 Sierra. I can't. I get why he's in a good spot and he's cheap, but he's going to need to go 7 scoreless to even pay off a $6,700 price tag.
Yeah, between the two pitchers, I'd rather go to Pomeranz.
Really?
I think there's underlying numbers that suggest Pomeranz far. For one, I mean, he struck out 24% of hitters. So while he has gotten lit up, he doesn't have a low strikeout percentage. You know, he's in that same ballpark with Molly and, you know, all those other guys that are in that price range. He's a bit cheaper. He's pitching in San Francisco and he's going to have no ownership, I wouldn't think. So I don't think he's a terrible play just in that regard. But then also, you know, if you look at his PCRA, his actual ERA this year is 7.16. PCRA is 4.35. So that's almost 3 runs lower than his ERA. It's not great, but it's not terrible. If you look at 2-strike percentage, he has the 11th best 2-strike percentage for any starter that's thrown at least 750 pitches this year. Pretty much everyone ahead of him is an ace, with the exception of Jordan Lyles, Homer Bailey, and Madison Bumgarner. But he's just grouped into, you know, that whole group of really, really good pitchers. I don't think he's as bad as his numbers. I think that it's a tough matchup, but there's tough matchups for pretty much any cheap pitcher on the slate. I think he's got more strikeout upside than most of these cheap guys. So I would have some interest in Pomeranz if I'm playing a bunch of lineups.
Would you call him the poor man's Rich Hill?
I would. I mean, if poor means like homeless
Skid
and
Row.
starving on the street.
Skid Row, yeah. The homeless Rich Hill. Because they're similar. Anyway.
Yeah.
Do you have any interest in hitting here? I know normally you wouldn't, and it's a 15-game slate, so it's really hard to do that. But, like, does a Ryan Braun appeal to you? Does a cheap Jesus Aguilar appeal to you against Pomeranz?
Like you said, you know, you can go to some right-handed bats here because San Francisco doesn't play down right-handed power as much as it does left-handed power. Pomeranz, while he does have some things that make me think that he'll improve going forward, it's not like I think he's like a hidden ace or something like that. You know, it's just I think he's probably better than a $6,200 price tag. So I don't mind taking some of these cheap power bets.
All right, top stacks quickly.
Rockies. If the Twins ownership stays where it is, then the Twins.
All right. I'll throw Oakland in there. Very cheap. If you want to pay up for pitching, it makes sense. That'll do it for us. Thanks as always for tuning in. And hey, if you haven't done so yet, hit that thumbs up button, like the show. It helps us out a lot. We greatly appreciate it. Adam and I will catch you back here after the weekend when he's back home. And live before lock, Chris and Josh coming up next, taking you till 7:05 Eastern time. Good luck today. Have a good weekend. Check us out on Awesemo Radio, by the way, on Sirius XM 210 XM 87, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Saturday and Sunday. I'll be on, and we'll catch you back here on Monday. Peace.